Okay, let's do it. Hey and welcome everybody. My name is Michael
and my name is Milan.
We are here at GoTo10 in Malmö, and today Milan will do a presentation about how we are dating on dating apps.
Yeah, how we're connecting on social media, dating apps, and how we interact in the cyber world in general.
All right, brilliant. So good luck, and yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to activate my camera first, and I'm going to start. So thank you everyone for being patient and waiting. I'm going to start right away just to set up my own equipment. And we will start as soon as that happens. I just need to get a signal, and I got a signal, and that's it. So I'm also recording. We're recording live, and I'm recording from my own camera. I want to thank everyone for joining. Before I continue, just to ask, when I end the stream, how shall I end it? When I finish, shall I just...
Yeah, I'll be here.
You'll be here, perfect. So, thank you everyone for tuning in and wanting to be a part of this and watch this, because I consider this to be a extremely interesting and necessary and needed discussion on how we relate to one another in the cyberspace, outside of the physical world, in the physical realm of our existence. Because things have been changing very dramatically since COVID and since other mandatory and great shifts we've had up to this point, 2022. I would like to namely discuss the three problems I identify within the contemporary dating scene, or if you will, overall interaction between people. And the first of which will be the loss of connection to the immediate environment. And just to cut straight to the point without taking too much of your time, the very fact that we exist on a digital level, that we can record our presence as I am doing now, so you can see me through a camera and I can see myself through my own camera, and the very fact that we can witness that and live that in a certain sense sends the signal to our brain that that is also a possible way of interpreting reality and interacting with reality, which means that also what you see is an interpretation of what is. So to not make this too complicated, when you look at this video and when you look at me, Milan, speaking to you, then it's very easy for you to have your own judgments and opinions based on how things are, how reality works. I'm going to walk around a bit to activate my other camera, and overall to be very open to all kinds of interpretations of reality, which essentially means that what you see or hear, perceive with your senses, is subject to be interpreted in accordance with your previous experience up to this very day. So for example, if you see a guy, such as myself, with long hair, maybe some tight jeans, then maybe the subliminal or subconscious message that comes to your mind will be, aha, well, based on how he is dressed and how he behaves, he is like this or he is like that. And that can be a major problem in terms of valuing each other on social media or dating apps based on nothing but information that we process using only one sense, and that is the dominant sense that we use today, and that is our eyesight. So by doing so, by only relying on our eyesight, we, and of course while being on social media and being highly influenced by fast-paced content, instead of actually sharpening that sense of ours and the ability to value character, the traits that we desire in our potential partners and mates, we fall under the category of people who actually lose that ability progressively, and who, as time passes and as time moves and as we get more exposed to the content, because that is our now immediate environment, then the more we become dull to the real world and the environment of what is happening around us. Why is this a problem? Well, many reasons. One of which is that it prevents us from forming long-lasting bonds with one another, because our bonds will then be based on the approval and the social norms, the norms that exist within that space. The negative manifestation of that will be, for example, cancel culture. And I'm sure that any of you watching this is very familiar with this term. Now, you all know that if someone doesn't behave on social media or on a dating app, doesn't follow certain principles of behavior, they will be, quote unquote, canceled. So why this is dangerous? It is dangerous because it allows us to simply erase one's existence in the digital world, in the world that, as far as we know, exists and is real, because we interact with it as if it is real. And another danger that this evokes is that it allows us to see that this person disappearing and appearing is perfectly normal. So we follow someone and they get cancelled. Like, I'm going to use a very notorious example that you might not like, but Andrew Tate. So if you look at Andrew Tate and if you look at the guy's content, so I'm not supporting or negating Andrew Tate, by the way, I'm simply using him as an example. So if you see Andrew Tate, which is now cancelled on all social media platforms due to the content that he's delivering, so all of a sudden the brain registers that as being the natural way of being, and the danger contained therein is that we can have the impression that that is perfectly normal and fine to happen in real life, that we can freely and openly communicate with each other in such a way that it's perfectly acceptable for someone to just disappear, and it's perfectly fine that we don't know what happened to them, because we have our interpretation, our knowledge up to that experience, and we can safely assume, so it's not reality, it's assumption and therefore overlay, that whatever happened to this person is probably like this or probably like that. So the alternative outcomes that we have no access to because we are simply blocked from reality instead of believing that we are part of it. So if I want to get cancelled, for example, I'll use myself as an example. If someone simply doesn't like the work that I do and they quote unquote cancel me, then that means that I've disappeared. And that in a sense can mean death, and in an emotional sense, it means death. Because we are interconnected emotional beings and species. And when we do not acknowledge the feelings, and I'm not just speaking about feelings, feelings are just one aspect of our reality and existence. When we fail to acknowledge that we are indeed connected, and that it is perfectly fine to just dismiss each other and write each other off based on, shall we say, minuscule, maybe even seamlessly meaningless traits, then we're playing a very dangerous game of selection that does not have consequences that we can perceive, but it has consequences in real life that we cannot perceive because they're happening behind the screen of someone else who cannot see it. For example, the example of dating apps would be the following. So you have your phone, and let's say you're an average woman looking for a guy, and if you are an average woman, then you are hypergamous, and I will go into the details of what hypergamy is very soon. So you're looking for a man who is slightly above you in terms of social status and incomes, who can support you and have children, and if not, if you're an egalitarian feminist woman or whichever your worldview is, then maybe you want someone who is more your level, or that you're egalitarian. Then you would look at a picture, at a phone, and you would just say yes and no and yes and no. But to the person behind the phone who has said yes to you, the image has been registered, and until you say yes, even if you ever say yes, that person experiences that as a rejection. And this is a rejection that's been encouraged, and this is a type of rejection that's been fostered in men in such a way that it encourages them to interact with images of women and adapt to images of women in a world that's not here and now, not happening in this very moment, and to simply wait for approval by an external party or someone who they do not even know exists. And the danger in that is that even though they have not established a genuine connection with a fellow human being, they still have been rejected. Now, unfortunately, I'm only going to have time to explore one side of this, which is the male side. I will touch upon on the female side, of course. But from the male side, from a male being in this kind of situation that is being constantly rejected on on dating apps, pardon me, it's a very, very bad and unfertile environment for development and growth of one's psyche and confidence, because the message that men receive is that if they only looked better, they might have more chances. And by all means, that might be true. But the traits that men desire in women and that women desire in men are very different. And they're different, especially if men are loyal to their, so to say, conventional role, not traditional, conventional role. So they're masculine, they are handy, they are affluent, they are competitive, they are competing in competence and dominance hierarchies, and they acquired their wealth and well-being based on the effort they put in and the value that they put into societies. The image that an average man on dating app gets is quite the opposite. And the image is the following. If I look better, so if I just get my hair right, if I get a nice shirt in which I look bigger, but I'm not bigger, if I look as if my face is less wrinkly, but it in fact isn't, then the problem is that I'm actually adapting to the female mating strategy, which is I'm going to look attractive so that I can attract a mate. This directly results in emasculation of men in a certain sense. Now, you don't have to believe essentially everything that I say, and I'm not expecting you to. I expect everyone who watches this to be able to question it on their own and to have their own opinion and conclusion. But one of the problems that we face, as I said, is that men are encouraged to present themselves on an image and not in real life. And women being hypergamous, being highly selective, because according to the data that I found that I'm gladly going to share on my private YouTube channel, if you're following me there, is that women swipe left on 95% of men on Tinder, namely here, which means that they will swipe right on 5% of men, which plays perfectly into the hypergamous nature of women. And then let's go to the following of what is hypergamy. So if you haven't heard the expression already, hypergamy is the innate nature of women to select a mate that is above them in a socio-hierarchical sense, and someone who is a good choice for mating and provisioning. And us as humans are very specific and unique in this regard, because we stand between, we are the combination of two sets of species. So there are species that are pair bonding species. So pair bonding species basically mate for life. I think this is very common in birds and certain mammals. I think wolves also mate for life, but please don't take my word for it, do your own research. And the second one is the tournament species. And tournament species is, as you're probably very familiar with it, alpha, beta, and the entire hierarchy of highly competitive environment. So humans are highly complex species, as I like to say, highly complex animals. And they're the combination of the two, which is why our relationships are so complicated as well. So when all of a sudden men are conditioned to, and they put themselves there, don't get me wrong, we all have responsibility, we all have a role to play, and we choose our lives and our own destinies and what we do with our time. So when men place themselves in an environment that encourages them not to be better, but to invest more into appearing better, we have an enormous problem there. Because, as I said, men want different things in women and women want different things in men. And this might be very triggering to you. And before I continue on how men shoot themselves in the foot, basically, on social media and dating apps, I'm going to tell you that men seek fertility, beauty, and overall physical appearance in women, youth. I do not have a presentation available right now, but I will gladly share research with you that shows that the age in which men are attracted to women doesn't change from the year of 18 to, I believe, 70. It is a very, very famous study that I will be very happy to share, that I unfortunately cannot quote right now because my laptop cannot connect with HDMI out to this screen over here. Because we observe women as men, and this is not objectifying women. I want you to try to make this distinction, because many people can associate this with women being objectified. And male nature is not objectifying women. It is appealing to women's sexuality and responding to, okay, I want to mate with this woman and I see her physical qualities and I think that she can, based on what I observe, which also could be wrong, right? Based on what I observe, can be a good mate. What women seek in men, according to the respective roles, is provisioning and security. And that is a long-term mating strategy. So when men, and how women see this, women can see this based on images, right? That's why men try so hard. So men try to look good and show affluence and status, and we all know what status is. So status is money, so wealth, muscles, and the overall ability to interact with women and to be able to converse with women. And men don't learn these skills. So if I can write them down, which I can't do here, unfortunately. So let's say, material wealth, provisioning, parental provisioning, first of all, because this man also needs to show traits that are demonstrative of, for example, a good investment, because women would not like to be duped. Now, what does it mean to be duped? For example, the term used in social media and dating app vocabulary is being catfished. So people do not like being catfished, and that is what happens very often, and that is actually what what women often engage in, because, as I said, women are the ones who need to, if they want to compete with other females, they have to stand out in terms of appearance. And if they do that, then they will, of course, utilize makeup and shadow and all the tools to stand out, if they want to do that in the social media or mating world. Now, the problem with that is the real life meeting. So how both sexes tend to dupe each other is simply by, for example, men showing their wealth or affluence on the dating apps in photos, and then when the woman, because a woman would measure them up, and women have their strategies of evaluating whether the man is for real or not. So when they do decide to meet the man, that will be very obvious to them based on how this man behaves, the level of confidence, the level of leadership that he has in the relationship. And when I say relationship, I mean relation between two people as such. Now, how women dupe men is, as I said, by over-accentuated makeup and basically a fake appeal of the self. So it's not that men are actually meeting the real person. They're meeting someone who has altered their appearance to the point of no recognition, when they actually seek out a partner that they think they can have, first of all, healthy and then good-looking child, because they know that these factors do play a significant role in the child's upbringing. So this represents an enormous problem if we have people that are constantly using manipulative strategies on social media and dating apps, because we are adaptive species and we learn from each other and from our respective behaviors. That if we act a certain way and we know that that attracts the opposite sex, we will focus on the outcome and not the process itself, which is why many relationships fail. And by the way, if you are not in a relationship, your relationship success rate is 0%. And that, I'm gonna leave you with that truth, because that's something that took me that was a very hard pill to swallow after a while. And to move on to the problem number 2. So based on all I said thus far, the second problem I identify that I generally consider should be spoken more about is the image-based impression of reality. That whatever you see around you, whatever you experience, is and can be a projection. So you see someone, and if you look at them and observe them through a certain lens, they will most likely be the lens of the past. So what has this person done to me or for me in the past? And if you do not have strong social ties, and if you, for example, are highly anxious or neurotic and had a tendency and are prone towards negative thinking, then, or nihilistic for God's sake, then your image of the world and thus the people in it will be very negative. So entering relationships and entering the cyber world can be also very damaging and dangerous to the brain, because you will experience reality through those same lens. So if you've had, for example, negative experiences in dating as a man, and you identify certain so-called red flags, and they can be identified in both sexes, of course, then the danger is that your selectivity will then become heightened to the point where you will then resemble women more than men in terms of sexual selection, which doesn't mean that men should not be sexually selective, but it's in male nature to have unlimited access to unlimited sexuality, which is not promiscuity, it is interaction with women and men allowing themselves and their peers to actually interact with women and form their own impressions and opinions of them, instead of, for example, entering interactions traumatized from their previous relationships and thus entering that space unhealed and not having a solid foundation for that. And this foundation that men need to have to enter these conventions is referred to as frame. So if men do not have this frame that can actually hold and accommodate a woman for her to feel safe in, it takes a lot of practice and building one's character. And I'm going to say something that is going to be considered and is considered controversial, and that is what we value in men and where our value lies as men and women. And if you interpret this as objectification of women, then you are very likely also to have been conditioned to think this way. So women's innate value is sexual. And that doesn't mean that they are to be objectified and considered sex objects. So if you can observe this objectively and approach it from a higher perspective, maybe it will make more sense. The reason women's value is sexual because men invest their time, resources, and energy in women with the image of a prospect of a family. So when men select a woman, then what they see is a prospect of a family and a desire to start a family. And that is innately sexual, because the woman, as the carrier of the child, as, I don't like this word, so please take it with a grain of salt, as the incubator of the child, which I don't think that's how women should be viewed, but I'm saying that is the biological and reproductive purpose of women who do choose to reproduce. That men are aware of this on a deep, deep level and are so deeply wired to it that that is what attracts them to women. It is that ability to perceive and have affinity towards beauty, youth, and most importantly, health. And for us men, that's how we conflate that. So for us, it's very simple to say, oh, she's healthy if she's beautiful and if she has a good and attractive body, because that is a easy way for us to say that she's healthy and she's a viable mate. Now, how this is different in women is highly complex due to the way we organize societies, especially in the West, because women do also, it's very important, for women, physical qualities are very important. But as women grow older, and because since the sexual revolution, we've pushed the age in which women get married and have families, then other kinds of conventions are in place, and other kinds of qualifiers are meaningful to women. So then physical appearance can be forgiven if there is the guarantee of provisioning and parental investment. And women are thus focused on that aspect of the male existence. And now, think about the irony of that, going back to what I just said, which is that men now try so hard to appear good through the same mechanisms that women use, which is imagery, when in reality, women who want long-term relationships and who want family are interested in precisely the aspect that can provide conditions for that, which is affluence, social status desirably, but primarily wealth. And I don't mean wealth as in hyper wealth, but according to Tinder and according to the men that women swipe on, the reality is that women actually want hyper successful men. Because why? Because they can only form an image of how the rest of the men are and tell themselves that, okay, well, these guys are okay, but I want the man who is of high value and in whom I actually see the potential of a family. And this creates a lot of paradoxalities and contradictions in both sexes' behavior, and it actually separates sexes in a very serious way, because what it allows for us to do is to essentially not see each other for who we are and what we are, but to observe us through the lens of what we present. Another big problem in this, and the problem with our presence in the digital world, is the absence of a community. And I think this is an enormous problem that we rarely spoke of. And don't worry if I make a reference to the pre-sexual revolution era. We're not going to go back into 50s and 60s. That won't happen, because history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So we'll definitely not go back. Don't worry about that, especially women, because I think women might be very, very, very concerned with that. But we have a different problem here, and that is the loss of community and family. Since the invention of hormonal birth control, the divorce rates skyrocketed exponentially, and women have now engaged into open hypergamy, which is the heightened sexual selectivity, which ironically in the long term doesn't serve women if they, due to being exposed to social media and then seeing what kind of men exist out there, they postpone and sacrifice their best years in desires of waiting for an ideal man, which is very unlikely to arrive. And that plays back into the problem number 2 that I identify, which is an image-based impression of reality, which is, if I just take care of myself and if I do my thing, the right one is going to come along. And this kind of thinking is not firmly rooted in reality, because it's a belief, and beliefs are not reality, and men have beliefs too. Men also believe the opposite story. If I work my ass off and if I provide all these conditions, then I will attract a woman into that. But then that becomes utilitarian, so that becomes done with a purpose and a reason of attracting that woman, and not done for oneself. And that also has the potential of hindering the relationship in the long term, because both parties are then aware that they're playing this game of seduction but are not truly connecting with one another and not having the aspect of love, desire, and overall wanting to remain together and build a family together, a family unit. And the reason I keep mentioning family unit is because family is a basic unit of a tribe. Now, living in cities and expanding our population immensely and drastically, we can see that family is not as much present because we have scattered very much throughout the world. And for example, I'm a very good example of that because I don't want to make this about myself, but when I moved to Sweden, the experience of me having moved here is a completely different in comparison to where I grew up, which is Serbia. And this is felt very deeply, and it is family that we feel the closest resemblance to. And due to the loss of our close relations to one another, we fragment as individuals. And if we do not come back together to ourselves, if we do not, so to say, heal, then the problems we are facing are numerous, but the most significant one will be the utter inability to actually connect with a fellow human being, even less so to plan a future with them. Because if we normalize divorce, for example, then we will come up with a narrative that justifies exactly that kind of setting and environment. So if divorce is normal, then divorced people, namely women, will go and tell other women, well, I got divorced and that was good for me, because it was easier than to sustain this failing marriage or family. But what people fail to understand, even before they enter relationships, is that if we are relating to one another and if we are in a relationship, it is no longer only about us. It is about the other person too. And if a child comes into play, it is definitely about the child as well. Now, when two people come together, the existence of a male frame is penultimate, because if there is no masculine frame, if that relationship is headed towards a ruin, there will be nothing to hold it together, because for both parties, due to, don't forget, social media, instant gratification on dating apps, and so much unlimited opportunity, so then both men and women using male reproductive behavior, that creates a very sturdy ground for every relationship. And the potential of relationship diminishes significantly in such a way, because we look at each other through the lens of a potential failure, and we basically test each other all the time instead of essentially trusting each other and dating and meeting each other physically, instead of forming images of each other constantly and constantly. So I wanted to be an interactive presentation, but since my audience is digital, that will not be possible. I will also, I think, finish for now, because there is a lot of numbers and statistics that I wanted to share. But I believe that this is short and sweet. And I wanted to keep it this way because I also wanted, as I said, to interact with as many people as possible. But I hope that this gains more popularity and that people get more encouraged to speak about these things, because I sure as hell love doing this. But to whomever watched, for now, this was a bit of a short and sweet intro into what I will be doing in the future here at the same venue. So thank you very much for your attention. If you're following me on social media or on my YouTube channel, or if you're listening to my podcast, I will ask the original creators of this video to send you the link, and I will definitely send you my links if you wish to connect, discuss these topics, go deeper into this. And please don't forget that everything I say, I want you to examine on your own. And I want you to form your own conclusions and to see what truth is on your own, and to discover that. I would love to do that together, but to not take my word for anything that I said, but to run it through your own filter and to experience what this is on your own, and essentially to come to an understanding, to a better understanding of intersexual dynamics and human relationships, because I believe it's never been more important to do such a thing, because we are facing an enormous population decline preceded by an enormous and increasing number of single people, people that are very likely to be alone and die alone. And I will not necessarily label that a tragedy or something negative, but if I respond to it in a way that I think it is sufficient of me to have a public event and speak about it, then it does matter. And I hope it matters to you too. So once again, thank you. I appreciate your time deeply. And I will see you in the next event, hopefully. So, bye.